That's my job. I'm the one that considers how strong my case is before I bring charges, and I wouldn't bring charges unless I was confident.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we're going to deal with two crucial factors that we need to interrogate in order to solve the Morphew case. We've already gone into issues of profiling, that is dealing with identity, backstory, intertextuality, and statement analysis. And what we want to do now is reach in our True Crime Toolbox and basically use the essential implements to continue with our work. So if you were a doctor, you would be sort of armed with something like a stethoscope, and certainly in the old days, a watch, and you would put your finger on the pulse, and you would look at your watch, and you would listen to the heartbeat and all that kind of thing. Well, what does a true crime professional need to do? Now, I wonder, those who have read many of my books, those who know me, I wonder if you can sort of instinctively answer these questions. What are those two crucial ingredients we need to apply to this case, as in all cases? What do we need to be bringing to the table here? And if we stick to the doctor analogy, if you go to a doctor and you are sitting in front of him or her for the first time, and in fact, I actually went to the doctor today, the doctor is faced with a dilemma. It's also almost the same as solving a crime. It's just making a medical diagnosis. And how do you make a medical diagnosis? You're coming to the crime scene, which is a list of circumstantial symptoms, and then deciding based on things like age, the time of the year. There might be pollen or hay fever or flu season or something like that. And then to some extent, circumstantial factors or contextual factors such as other things that are floating around. It might be coronavirus, it might be, again, hay fever, it might be contaminated food. Some people, may suffer from the same thing at the same time, but it may also be things related to family history or your own history. So if you can read between the lines, the two crucial ingredients we need in order to take all of this further are, first of all, time, and second of all, context. And to some extent, they can be separated, and to some extent, they overlap. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. Before we get to today's episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment. A big thank you to the 100 or so who've subscribed since the last episode. And let's get started. So we're going to start with time, and time, both time and context, can actually be further divided or subdivided into micro elements. So those are specifically related to Barry. They're specific to Barry. Time sensitive aspects that are specific to him. Then there are tertiary aspects which are related just to the people in his circle. And when we say circle, that could be other family members, it could be a close friend, it could be a mistress, but it is related to everyone besides Barry, but not far beyond that, if I can put it that way. So it's close to his field of influence. And then there's the macro aspect, which are much larger aspects, and I'll explain those in a moment. So you also have the micro, tertiary, and macro in the contextual sense. But let's deal with time now. And I'm going to run through them fairly quickly, but the first time factor that we really want to look at is Barry's age. And you must bear in mind, if you're listening to this, if you're a woman, you might not feel that it is relevant to you because you're a woman and he's a man. Maybe you feel it is relevant. Maybe you've noticed in your spouse or sibling or someone that you know. But it's important not to project in this area. You've got to see it through, you've got to feel it through the vessel of Barry. And so I think Barry's age is relevant. I think at this point he's 52, 53 years old. I myself am 49 years old. 50 is quite a big milestone in a man's life, far more than 40. And I think that is relevant. I think the move to Colorado 2 years earlier, in 2018, when Barry was probably just having turned about 50 years old, it was around about that point, was part of getting a new lease in life, part of starting up a new life, a new lifestyle, somewhere else. And then how did that go? In other words, you embark on a fairy tale, and then is the fairy tale all it's cracked up to be? So I think Barry's age is a very important aspect to bear in mind in terms of the time element. Then, as I say, the other thing is also the move to Colorado in 2018. That was something that feels like it was Barry's idea. Barry was the leader in the relationship. I don't think Suzanne wanted to leave Indiana. She had kind of a network there. Barry wanted to leave. I think part of it was also following in Mallory's, not her footsteps, but the fact that Mallory was going to study in Colorado meant that they wanted to be close to her as well. And maybe that wasn't the best decision. In any event, the move to Colorado in 2018 is also a factor where you'd say, why did this crime happen when it did? Why did it happen in May 2020? And so I think it has to do with Barry's age and the place he was in his life, in the arc of his life. And the move to Colorado in 2018 aggravated whatever was at play already, especially this idea of a new life. And then it feeling like, well, instead of it becoming this new life, this new good story, things were going pear-shaped. It wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And then that can then lead to feelings of frustration. You're trying to not escape death, but you're trying to push the entropy away, and instead it creeps up to you even faster. I've also mentioned the girls going to college. That is more of a tertiary factor. The other very important milestone in terms of time is Mother's Day. And that's, again, a kind of a tertiary factor to some extent. But the fact that the crime happened on Mother's Day isn't accidental. There are so many crimes that happen on milestone days. With Patrick Frazier, it was Thanksgiving. With Stephen Avery, it was, I think, around Halloween. The same with Amanda Knox. So a lot of these crimes, with John Benet Ramsey, it was Christmas Day. A lot of these crimes happen at a very specific time. If you look at the Chris Watts case, what was happening in terms of that? Well, a couple of things. There was a gender reveal. There was the girls returning to school. He lied about that on the Sermon on the Porch, saying they were only going to return the following week. It was the end of that 5-6 week period where Shanann was going to be away for an extended time. It was that as well, right? And it was also the milestone of the 15 weeks and announcing something on social media. So time is very, very important. A crime doesn't happen in a vacuum. When it happens is a big clue to why it happened as well. Then I also think the death of his father is a factor. It's kind of a micro, tertiary, and macro factor in a sense, because it happened a long time earlier, but it actually happened in May. So you can imagine every May the memory of who he once was, who his father saw him to be, what his father's expectations were, come kind of creeping up. That shadow of the father's influence creeps back up to him in May, and that was when the crime happened, right? And then I think it's not irrelevant Suzanne's age being 49 years old. You have something similar in the John Benet Ramsey case where Patsy Ramsey turned 40, and she was supposed to have several parties celebrating that. One, I think, on the last day of November, and then another one. She was supposed to have another big bash right after Christmas. And so, although the parties are celebrating something, there's also an underlying angst that's related to that. And I wouldn't be surprised if Suzanne approaching her 50th year was something that reminded Barry that he also reached that milestone and moved beyond it. I've got some friends who've had their 50th birthdays, and it's kind of a big deal, but there's a sort of flip side to it, which is you are heading to becoming kind of an old person, whether other people think that or whether you think that. And it's also a matter where you say, no, I'm not an old person. I'm, whatever. And I remember when I was driving on my journey, this road trip I did recently, they were saying old people, this was said on the radio, old people of 60 years need to be vaccinated. And I thought, cheapers, I'm going to be an old person according to that definition in 10 years. It was quite a shock just to think of it that way. And it's things like that that are going to, time factors like that are going to change the way you think about things, the way you think about other people, the way you relate to other people, the way they relate to you. And bear in mind, with Barry, he's got children, he's got daughters who are individuating, they are coming into their own in their own lives. And that also is kind of something that is giving a sense of the movement of time, but also where am I related to you? You are having this new chapter in your life, going to college, meeting boys, deciding on your life's trajectory. Well, what about me? Is my life exciting? Is my life good? Kind of thing. And that takes us then into the contextual factors. And as I say, you can kind of get a sense that there's some overlap sometimes between time-based things and context-based things. In terms of the micro aspects, this is what is directly contextually related to Barry. You could definitely look at the move and the house. Now, as I say, the move and the house contextually are important, but you've also got to look at when they happened. When did the move happen? And when was the house acquired? And I think the contextual part that is so crucial here is them moving from Indiana to Colorado, and then simultaneous to that, being unable to dispose of the house in Indiana. And you could see a whole lot of tension around that, where perhaps they did find a buyer, but the price wasn't high enough. Perhaps for Suzanne. Perhaps Suzanne wanted a higher price and Barry wanted to take what they could get, kind of thing, because perhaps he felt more desperate or something like that. And so you might have this conflict between, are we getting the right price? And the one saying, yes, we are, let's sell it. And the other, no, let's hang on, right? Which is going to give you a sense of uncertainty and anxiety and not being in control. Now, some of my neighbors have actually just tried to sell their holiday home, and it's also taken a really, really long time. And now is not the best time to try and sell a house now during this coronavirus thing. And so you would have had that aspect. We also know that the eventual sale of the listing 19057 Puma Path, that was also sold for less than the value that they'd wanted it to sell. So there was a kind of a loss associated with that. But you kind of get the sense that Barry was in a hurry to sell it, and then he got it done. Why wouldn't he have the same thing with the other house, right? And it gives you a sense that there is some kind of financial desperation in the story. And I think that context is definitely there. There's definitely a sense of, like with the Chris Watts case, living beyond their means, right? Which may have been aggravated, again, contextually by coronavirus. If you think that this happened shortly into it. So, Corona was really kicking in 2020, right? And the crime happened in May. And so you could kind of imagine that with things shutting down, you could project into the future. You're not going to be able to sell that other house. You're going to have difficulty, and that alone may have been a triggering factor. I also think what was contextually very important, and this isn't rocket science, was the cancer. The cancer, if you are trying to live your best life, live the best version of your life, start this new chapter, the cancer is going to be like a millstone around your neck, like an anchor. It's going to be weighing you down. And so you get that sense that seeing, and we haven't seen those pictures, we haven't seen Suzanne without hair, bedridden and all that kind of thing. But you have a sense that Barry, seeing that, he may have felt like, this isn't good for me. I'm trying to I want to live my best life, and you are frustrating that process, right? Not once, but twice. So you may have felt, wow, what a relief that she survived cancer the first time, but then to get it again. So the cancer story is something we really would want to know a lot more of the color and texture of it, and the intensity of it. We'd really want to know what happened there. Was Barry affected by it? Was he sensitive, or did he have an affair while Suzanne was sort of struggling? Bear also in mind that other people would come into the scenario if she was ill, like nurses, doctors. What impact would those people have on Barry Morphew? Could something have developed between some of these people? So that's the other thing. And then in another macro sense, but this again context, one wonders whether the Watts case itself, the Frazee case itself, the Gannon Store case itself, and Laurie Vallow, whether all of these cases which predated the disappearance of Suzanne Morphew, whether these blips on the national news radar didn't have a signaling impact if Barry was thinking about doing something, whether these cases didn't blip on his radar and make him think, they did that, but if they did this, it could have been better. So, there's Chris Watts with the Sermon on the Porch. Did Barry copy that but improve on it? Patrick Frazee manipulated Kelsey Bereth's cell phone, but perhaps in a clumsy way. Did Barry do something with the social media aspect that was an improvement on that was more stealthy? In the Gannon Store case, the little boy disappears, but then is found ultimately next to a highway. Nevertheless, it took quite a long time to find his remains. Did somebody think that they could improve on that? And then also Laurie Vallow, how long that case was sort of not dealt with. And did that give the sense that when somebody disappears, it's okay, you can get away with it, as long as it's like no body, no crime kind of thing? And that was definitely Patrick Frazee's approach. If there's no body, then you can kind of get away with it. So what we really want to do is collate all of these aspects under the time question, and then all the aspects under the contextual question, and then figure out which one to prioritize, right? And then from there we go into taking time into premeditation and context into motive, right? And so what do you think is the standout feature in terms of time? And what do you think is the standout feature in terms of context? And it's difficult to move away from just the most obvious, which is that it happened on Mother's Day. And one wonders whether Barry thought, the message that he was somewhere else and his children were somewhere else, would that send the message to the people, the anonymous people looking in, Suzanne was alone on Mother's Day. And so what does that say about her? And doesn't it say that she was isolated? But doesn't it also say that, she was off on her own and then she disappeared? It's got nothing to do with anyone else. And probably that was by design, but I think it was very interesting, perhaps ironic, that this happened on Mother's Day. Did he think that she was a good mother? Did the children think she was a good mother? Well, by all accounts, yes. But one also has got to wonder, wasn't the whole idea that they are now moving to the non-parenting stage, the empty nest stage of their marriage? And so being a mother and being a father isn't as relevant anymore. Is that a factor? And then contextually, I think a very big factor is the whole thing about the house. They're moving and then not being able to afford the house that they were actually staying in, which is borne out by the sale the very quick sale, the rush sale of the house in, just a couple of months ago this year. So in the next episode, we're going to deal with a very tricky question, which is, when did the premeditation take root? When did it start? And once again, it's a question that's got two layers. It's got the specific layer, something that could have triggered it, but also kind of a long-term arc. But I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about that as well. So leave some of your thoughts in the comments. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you can click on the light blue icon below right. Like, share, leave a comment. There's also further analysis on the Patreon channel of True Crime Rocket Science. That's on Patreon, patreon.com/TCRS. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.